Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Mr. Merrigan's Moments in Geography. I am your host, Mr. Merrigan, and today we are going to be wrapping up our discussion on the country of Mexico. And so today is going to primarily focus on what Mexico looks like today. So, as far as our learning targets, what we're going to be able to do, we're going to be able to celebrate the culture of Mexico today by learning about its holidays, its artwork, and its food, along with certainly some other things. And we're going to be able to explain some of the challenges that Mexico faces today. So this is meant to give us more of a current picture. We've talked a little bit about the physical geography and the economics. We also got into in our last section here about the history. So let's talk about what Mexico is like today. So as far as culturally, we mentioned that Mexico is a part of Latin America. And as far as overall size, Mexico ranks third as a total area, right behind Brazil and then Argentina. And so, certainly a very large country. It also has a very large population, and this is a very urban population. About 75% of its people live in cities, including its mega city and its capital of Mexico City. One of the things you can see also, certainly, we've talked about the influence that the Spanish have had in Mexico with religion, we've talked about language. But one of the things we could talk about is the layout of cities and then architecture when it comes to Spanish influence as well. Plazas as well as public squares fill the center of cities. And this is something very similar to what you'll see in Spain, but also certainly throughout Europe. It's a very much a gathering place towards the middle of a city for the people. And in these public squares, in these centers of cities, you're going to find churches, you're going to find government centers, and different things that bring people together. You're going to also see that the buildings are largely influenced by Spanish architecture, and that you are still going to see many of the homes are being constructed of adobe, which are dry clay bricks, which is again a very traditional, say, of more of the native people, the native tradition that we see in Mexico. It is also important, certainly, that we mention that there are slums and poor neighborhoods that many of the homes are made out of secondhand materials. And like we said, poverty is certainly a major issue in Mexico, especially in southern Mexico. And we'll kind of highlight that when we get to the challenges. So, as far as diving into culture, and certainly the celebrating part of Mexico's culture, um, as far as our learning targets as well. Mural painting is something that you'll see throughout Mexico, and a couple of names that are particularly famous in mural painting include Jose Clemente Orozco, as well as Diego Rivera. And another form of art that's particularly popular in Mexico as well, along with music, and we'll get to music here in a second, is poetry. Poetry, one of the great things that it tells us about culture is it reflects the values, but also the stories of Mexican people. And in particular, Carlos Fuentes, along with Octavio Paz, two quite famous writers and poets from Mexico. As far as food, we've talked a little bit about this already, but certainly dating back to the Olmec people, we're going to see corn, and maize is going to fill a very important part of the food in Mexico. And it's kind of a cool blend of the different cultures here. You'll see certainly Olmec and Mayan and Aztec influences, so those mix of native influences, but you also see the Spanish influence there as well. So it's kind of all been brought together to kind of create this very unique cuisine that you'll find in Mexico. Certainly, you'll see a mixture of things like tortillas and cheese and vegetables, meats and spices, all making up that unique food that's really begun to be exported around the world. Mexicans are also very well known for their celebrations, or as they're known in Mexico as fiestas, and these can include parades and fireworks. Certainly, music is a big part of this, as well as dancing. One of the very unique forms of music to Mexico is the mariachi bands, and they play a very traditional form of music. And for my students, I highly encourage you to go and look into those of you um, who will be in person learning with us. We'll give you guys an example of that. But certainly, Latino and Latinx bands um, play pop music both in Spanish and English, and they are on music charts throughout Latin America as well as certainly around the world. A couple of key celebrations that I would like for my students to know, but just to kind of also gain a little bit more understanding of Mexican culture. Certainly, Independence Day is celebrated on September 16th. Cinco de Mayo celebrates an important victory. And while it's celebrated very different in Mexico than, say, for example, in a country like the United States, it celebrates an important battle victory in the road to independence. And so, kind of seen as a key moment in revolution away from Spain or away from Spanish control. And then, of course, you've got Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, kind of been made more popular and more aware of due to like different representations, like say Coco. And your government. Mexico is a federal republic, so they elect leaders to represent them in their federal government. And anytime we have a federal republic, this means that our federal government is stronger than local government or state governments. So it always comes out, and this is something true that was seen in places like the United States. Power is divided between state and federal governments here, and your current president is Andre Obrador, who took office December 1st, 2018. So, getting to our second learning objective and kind of the last topic that we're going to talk about. Every nation deals with its own issues, and Mexico is no different. And certainly they have some things that are unique to them, and they also deal with some things that are trends that we see occurring around the world. So the first one that's on our list here, and for my students, you want to make sure you know this because this might pop up as an essay question for you, is drug cartels. So this would certainly be organized crime. They're found throughout Mexico. They're stronger in some parts of Mexico than in others. And it's certainly something that the federal government has been combating for generations. Um, they tend to be well funded, especially through illegal arms trades, along with selling of illegal drugs. And they do this around the world, not just in Mexico. And usually they're very well armed. There's also certainly the issue of poverty when dealing with, or when we're looking at the people of Mexico. Um, 40% of overall of Mexicans live below the poverty line. So part of that is due to the rapid population growth and strain on resources, and part of it is economic opportunity. But like we note down here, with that rapid industrial growth and new opportunity, that also brings with it pollution. Um, Chiapas, which is a state in southern Mexico, actually has a poverty rate of around 75%. So that's 3 in 4 people suffering from poverty in this region. And then, of course, with any country that is certainly trying to go through industrial growth quickly, that creates sometimes national debt. Certainly, that adds to the challenges that Mexico faces. So that's going to wrap us up for this edition of Mr. Merrigan's Moments in Geography. For my students and for learners joining us, check out the check-in quiz. For my students, hopefully you've been following along with the guided notes or taking notes on your own. For people who are just joining us to learn a little bit, I really appreciate it. I hope that in some ways we're expanding on your geographical knowledge, and hopefully you've gained a little bit more appreciation for the wonderful country of Mexico. For my students as well, please make sure that you keep in mind this is the end of the chapter. So certainly some key things you want to make sure if you need to pause the video as we go along, certainly make sure these are going to be some important things that you're going to want to know. And of course, look out for an essay question very similar to this on your exam. So thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day. And that is going to wrap up another edition of Mr. Merrigan's Moments in Geography.